Hi, everybody. Welcome to She Who Speaks with Fire. My name is Patty Brickman, and with me today, again, as always, is Di Pine. And today we're going to have an episode entitled Creating Communication um, Within the Queer Space.
Creating
Um,
community.
I'm sorry, community. I'm not wearing my readers. We just talked about that. So creating community within the queer space. I apologize. My apologies. So I'm gonna kind of give this over to you, Di, and we'll go with that.
Ooh, I get to start this today. Well,
Yes,
hi,
ma'am.
how are you?
Good. How are
How's
you?
your human today?
Um, you know, it's a little heavy with all of the Epstein sort of debacle. I'll just be honest. Seeing the faces of the victims that had stood in their truth and showed pictures of who they were at the age of the abuse was very hard and it was very triggering for me today. So I just wanted to kind of verbalize that and put that out there for not only you, but for the viewers. I acknowledge that we're all kind of feeling dissettled and disenchanted and devastated. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd love to jump into this more. Maybe in the next episode we can talk more Epstein things. But if you are someone who is really impacted by this, the best thing we can do from here is encourage self-care as of today. And if you don't have someone amazing to take care of you, reach out. We know some people we can refer you to. But while specifically to the queer community, it's not so much that it impacts the LGBT community, because it was very straight, heteronormative kind of nonsense and pedophilia. And like there's a whole bunch of predatory stuff. And even though it wasn't directed at our community, it could be really easy to feel moral panic, while not connected to us. It's connected because these high profile sexual abuse cases will always trigger something no matter who you are, and everybody's got different stories and different layers of that. But if you're experiencing some fear, some lack of safety, or you have experienced some scapegoating, where people have kind of used your story against you, told you that it's not true, kind of done those crazy making inside your head kind of behaviors. um, or one of the crazy things that happens in that space is, even though it's not connected to our queer community, anytime that people talk about sexual deviance, they always want to lump LGBTQ people and identities into that place. And while it is unfair and grossly unconnected, that's another scapegoating way to try to distract from the realities of what's going on. So if you are struggling with ideas of, or playing with like what this looks like, or survivors, or what does government accountability look like, when there's so much corruption or greed, censorship, attacks on our existence, or feeling like we're surveilled in some way, or that we ourselves are losing any kind of constitutional rights to just exist, please, please, please do what you can to take care of you right now. Um, because your life is not up for debate. Your safety is not up for debate.
yeah,
Your power
absolutely.
is not up for debate. Um, and while it's not about us, it can directly impact us in different ways.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I wanted to just kind of acknowledge that, it's sort of the elephant in the room. And I think one of the reasons why it might be so visceral is because until it brings me back to the civil rights movement a little bit, and I talk about this a lot. Um, you know, I Martin Luther King is one of my heroes. I think he's one of many of our heroes. But one of the things that I loved about him is that he was a nonviolent advocate. He stood in his truth, and he did it in a way where he, mentored and shepherded so many to just walk and unify and speak truth to power. And when he, on the day of Selma, what's interesting is how that sort of changed, how the dynamic of that changed was there was, I believe, and I could be wrong, a brave journalist or journalists that captured what was going on, the abuse and the abuse of power and the violence. And when they captured it on film, that's when things started to change. People actually saw that. The mothers were seeing. And I think how this kind of connects to me with this particular situation is we theorized what was in the Epstein files. We theorized that there were a multitude of victims. We theorized that there was evidence to support these atrocities, these deeply disturbing pedophilia rings that are occurring in our country and have occurred. But in the last 24 hours, we actually saw the victims holding up the pictures of who they were at the time. So I agree with you, Di. I think for all you viewers that are watching today, and this is so heavy for you as it is for me, and I'm sure Di feels the same way. Not speaking for you, Di, but do whatever you need to do for self-care. Try to decompress you. This is heavy. This is universally heavy. This isn't just something that our country feels, it's something that our universe is feeling. So
Yeah.
do the things you need to do.
Yeah, and you might feel it extra if you're a survivor of anything. It doesn't
Yes.
have to be something directly connected to this.
Amen.
But if you have ever been impacted by systemic failures in law enforcement, you've been, if you've ever experienced wealthy offenders get off the hook, or seen gaps in protections for minors, or seen directly how power and money and influence can distort the truth, and victim silencing, like any of that stuff. If you have ever experienced any of that stuff, please know this might be extra hard in navigating this, and it might be better self-care just to turn off the news, like you said in the first episode, that it's not avoiding it if it's self-care. And
Yes.
please get somebody to support you. But let's dive into that more, maybe in the next episode, because I think there's ways that we both want to talk about this in depth. But I think when it comes to community building, sometimes when our stories are told, when stories about ourselves are told, that can really set a grounding framework for the possibility to build community. And so, if telling stories or learning about other people helps in the community building process, we want to support you in that. And, we're building community with you right now. So part of these first few episodes are teaching you about us, so if you can trust us, or if we vibe, if our energy vibes, if our brain streams or wild tangents, because I'm Patty and I get so sometimes, but if this is like an alignment to stay in community together, like, join us on this journey. And as we create community, then we get to recover loudly, if that's a piece of what's going on. And hopefully, as Patty and I share stories, or we bring other people in and they share too, as we share these things out loud of our stories, of our life, of ourselves in human forms, we hope that it helps you not suffer silently.
Amen. Not to suffer silently. Speak your truth. Use your voice. Amen. I couldn't have said it better, my friend. So
Speak
without
with fire.
speak with fire. I'm so excited not to kind of go on a tangent or segue, but you know how my brain works.
I love it.
I do have a couple of guests that have emailed me and reached out to me, and I definitely want to talk about that in the next upcoming episodes, and I'm sure you do as well. We have some exciting guests coming on for She Who Speaks with Fire, and more to come with that as well. So let's dive into creating community in the queer space.
Could you
So,
do me a favor real quick?
sure,
Can you turn your camera down just a little bit so I can
sure.
see your mouth when you talk?
Oh, absolutely. I'm so
There you
sorry.
go.
There I am.
Yeah, sometimes when you were talking, like it was hiding some of your faith, and from this portal which all this goodness flows. I like it that you're all here.
Oh, okay. I'm very sorry. There I am.
Oh, no
There I
apologies
am.
needed. We were talking about our age earlier
Yes.
and how some people in different ages, especially women, hide their age. What are your thoughts on age and community, or how do those connect?
So for me, unapologetically proud of being 53, a middle-aged mom of three, just an advocate, speaking my truth, speaking my fire. Um, I am who I am. I'm so proud to be here. And I've been through some situations that could have gone the other way. So I'm unapologetically unafraid to be 53.
I love that.
Yes.
Unafraid to be 53.
With all my wrinkles. Even though sometimes I do use the edits on TikTok, I won't lie. I like the little tan feature that I get. I love the little toning feature that I get. So yes, I love that too.
Yeah,
Two things
you
can
know,
be true.
I like it when the filters kind of like blur the tired
Yes,
from my
yes, girl,
eyes.
yes.
And my pores are a little bit larger than the
Uh-huh.
use, so I might say,
Yes, yes,
but
and you get that nice little sun kissed glow. And everybody that knows me knows I love glitter, and it even puts more like glitter effect on my face. So I love it. I love that little TikTok feature. So yes, I do use that too.
I think it would be almost a disservice to humanity to not get to play with
Mm,
glitter and filters and unicorn heads and silly
yes.
makeup that is so glam. Like there's a couple filters that I've gone back and been like, man, I want to do my eyes just like
Me too. Me too. I don't know if this. So my mom, I take after my mom in a lot of respects, and I look a lot. Well, I look like both my parents, but I look a lot like my mom. And she said to me, "Honey, when you get to a certain age, your eyebrows will be lighter and lighter." And I'm like, when you're younger and you hear your parents talk about stuff like that, I'm like, no way, it's not going to happen. Oh my God, it so happened. She was absolutely right. Yes.
oh, that's funny. I was when at the last house I lived in, whenever the kids would be getting ready for the morning and having their breakfast, I would always sit on a stool so I was like at the same eyeball height as them. And because sometimes sitting at the table, it's still like I'm tall and you're little kind of thing. But I always wanted to sit eyeball height with them. And my son leans over one day and he's like, Mom, look at this. And my mother was one of those who would have been fully gray at 40 if she didn't dye her hair. And so then he pulls out another one as I'm remembering my mother dyeing her hair. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And for a moment, I had like a tiny bit of a complex about these gray hairs coming out of my head. And then he finds another one. And I'm like, okay, Bob, maybe that's enough. And then I was like, you know what? Going back to the celebrations we talked to last
Mm-hmm.
episode, like these are celebrations of life.
Mm,
Like these are streamers on my head, throwing
yes.
a freaking party for all the things I survived, the things that stressed me out. I've got a 99.9 survival rate so far, even with all the shit that came
You could name one or two or 10 of them. I know that I could.
on. Right? But then I was like, you know what? I don't ever want to dye my hair. I mean, I did fun colors. Like it was super green once upon a time. I had this jean gray, like fiery red that was going on. But I was like, you know what?
Ooh,
I never want to dye it again because I don't want to miss out on a celebration.
I love that. And I don't know if I shared this with you. If I haven't, I'm going to share this with you and the world. So my 60th birthday, what I intend to do is let my hair go fully naturally gray, and get it a lot shorter. So kind of like the Jamie Lee Curtis ish, because she's one of my heroes too. I love that look. I love the look of a woman who is, in that age demographic, which I am now,
Mm.
that just is going natural and she's expressing herself in that way. And she wears her hair and her wrinkles, as I already have a lot of them, as a badge of honor. And not that I am judgmental of anybody that's getting any work done. God bless you. I had a breast reduction, so I did have plastic surgery. But so I don't say this out of judgment, but I want to age naturally. Other than my Nivea cream, my, other than that, and my makeup and my glitter, don't really do anything.
Well, snaps to Jamie Lee Curtis and snaps to Pamela Anderson
Oh
and other
yes.
Viola Davis who are just
Oh
like breaking those aging with grace kind
yes,
of
she is.
mantras, or telling us that aging has no place in mainstream and media and movies, or the careers are over. Like if you have a wrinkle or a gray, and let's not worry about the crow's feet, or get a filter for that. But like, props to the women who are allowing themselves to age without rules.
Yes.
Like, I am a lot of love and light, a little go fuck yourself. My neck wrinkles, those can go. Like, I'll probably work on that later. But like
They can fuck
that
all the way off.
that the wrinkle, I'm okay with like this. I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this. Like, but that's a me thing. But
I hear
somebody was
that
showing me
100%.
something. I need to like start doing this tightening thing on my neck, and so we're gonna see if this natural works. Because I don't necessarily want to go under the knife. I am a happy 42 at level 42 in this game of life.
Well, you're
Um,
doing great, girl.
and if my neck is already looking older than me,
It looks fantastic. You go, girl.
I
You glow, girl.
glow. Ooh, you glow, girl.
Yes.
Yes, I do. See this
Mhm.
fire.
That's
And the
it.
sparkles help. The sparkles help.
I love sparkles. I love any
Yeah.
kind of glitter. I'm a fan.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I've ever seen you without glitter on your eyes.
No, and I've only done that sporadically. Like I'll either be away and I forget the glitter because you can't like go to like any store and purchase it. It has to be like a specialty store or makeup store, or you have to order it online. So yes, there have been a couple of times, but I feel naked without it.
Hmm.
It gives me joy. I just love to see it.
Well, and I was out in LA for a training once upon a time, and I had a couple friends there that had flown in from all over the world. But this one woman from South Africa and one woman from Australia, they were like, everybody in LA has really shiny faces. Like, I don't know why this tangented my brain there, but they're like, everybody has such a shiny face. And it was a spiritual training kind of thing that we were doing. And they were like, you know what? I wonder if all their spirituality is just in their face. It's in the Botox, it's in the other things. And that's the only way they can really shine.
Mm,
Mic drop. Like, am
yes.
I shinier than just my face? Like, you were helping the shine come off of your face. But it really had me sit with, if my life is an example, if my being is an example, if my story is some kind of an example, how am I more than a talking head? How
So
am I more than a shiny face in my being? Is my, and this isn't body shaming in any kind of way.
no,
Like, I
no, I
embrace all
feel
the
that.
bodies and shapes and forms and everything that comes, but am I treating myself and my existence as a whole temple, or just my face?
So it's so interesting you bring that up. And I love that. And I believe that our glow comes from within. Have you
Oh
ever
yeah.
been somewhere and you see somebody and like you either catch a glimpse of their aura or you see the glow from within
Yeah.
coming out. So there
Yeah.
is the physical and aesthetic beauty obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all humans, spiritual beings living in human existence. We all can visually see, for those of us who have that ability, can see the aesthetic beauty and the aesthetic glow. But there is also that glow that comes from within, whether it be from our
Mhm.
chakras, and it probably is aligned with our chakras, but our soul that comes out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, there's that too.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
you have, my friend, you absolutely have. It radiates, it permeates out of your soul.
My face shines out my soul. I
Your
missed that connection.
your
Oh, my glow.
glow,
Got it.
your chakras, your glow,
Mm.
it radiates out from your soul, from your nucleus. It shines outside of your body.
I receive. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
So, thank you for seeing me. Thank you for acknowledging that. Sometimes it's nice to hear, other people's reflections of us or like how people come into community.
And it kind of goes to our belief system or what we're taught. You had talked a little bit about how women, you know, receive themselves, or how they, when they look in the mirror, what they're seeing, what we all see. We're all human. We
Mm-hmm.
obviously can see different changes fundamentally in our body, our the way we move, even our memory. Everything sort of takes part in that. Um, but then, kind of wisdom sets in, and then you start to learn that there is that inner beauty that comes out and that
Mm.
radiates out. And when you so have you ever been somewhere you start talking to somebody? I'm sure you have been. And they come alive, like they've been
Mm.
talking about their kids, or talking about their partner, or talking about what they're passionate about. They go from being, even physically, aesthetically looking a certain way, and then they talk about what they're passionate about, and it illuminates their whole being.
I mean, I love hearing people's stories about themselves, or as they're sharing different things or something that they're passionate about, like their face changes, their eyes widen. It's almost like they glow and they sparkle, but it's like I can see um, the hamster wheels just going to share all the super excited things. Or like, you remember that meme of Kermit on the typewriter? It's just like, and it just like comes out and it's just
Yeah.
so cool to watch. Like giving space or holding space for people to talk about themselves. Like people love that shit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And when you give somebody a platform to do that, it can be an opportunity for their glow to come and radiate outward.
Yeah. And then they get to speak with fire.
They get to speak with that fire girl.
Yeah. So you had an interesting question about
Yes.
coming out stories. What was
Yes.
that?
So, well, first of all, we did get from our first podcast, Piloting the Fire, we did receive three questions. One of them was
Mm-hmm.
anonymous, and two of them were not. But it just kind of inspired me to kind of look at, from our queer space, from our queer community. I think a lot of what we navigate through, from a behavioral perspective, to our relationships, to how we adapt, to how we sort of view from the inside going out and from the outside coming back in, is our story, our original coming out story. Because from my demographic, and I'm 53, and I think I love saying that, but so from my demographic, it that was a different time. It was growing up in the 80s, which was a fun time. But if you're a young person and you are aware that you are gay, there is no movies that depict lesbian characters. There was no TV shows. And let me just pause here and say that while we did have facts of life and we all assumed that Joe's character was gay, uh, we never knew that. It was just something that we all theorized, right? And we didn't have
Yeah.
cell phones back then, but somehow we all did. So there must have been something to that. Obviously, Christy McNichol from Family, she was my first brush. And then we had others that we just kind of theorized that were lesbian, but we never really knew. Um,
Yeah.
but we didn't have a lot of support, and we certainly didn't see how relationships were supposed to flow, and the safety component of it, and the intimacy component of it. And I think it's important to say that, because while we had heteronormative movies like Pretty Woman and the rom-coms of that time, we never had anything to depict two women. So we were, between our coming out story and how we navigated our early on relationships, I think there was a lot of um I mean, missed opportunities, no, struggles with how to navigate, the acceptance, and the identity perspective.
Oh, it was definitely a huge, well, I was super sheltered growing up. So like you're talking about, that show that you just mentioned, I don't even know what that is. Like I was so sheltered. There's some things that I haven't even reclaimed in my queerness and gone back and watched some of these like things that could have been, because I didn't know that they existed. Like it's interesting. My wife will be like, "Oh my gosh, have you seen this gay movie?" And I'm like, "I have never heard of this before." So it's almost, and I've been out for 12, 15 years, but it's like it's interesting because it it's like I'm experiencing things through her eyes, but from a different place than when it might have first come out. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and it's so cute, and
Yeah.
I cannot wait. I mean, if that's something that you're wanting to do at any point, I'd love it. You would experience a couple of episodes of Facts of Life, because it would definitely bring you back to the understanding of a lot of us from the Generation X, and the perspective that we had, where we're like, oh my God, Joe's on TV, right? We felt community, even though it was a non-validated community, if that makes sense.
I mean, the closest thing I got to something, and of course it was after school, so my parents didn't quite see it, Xena Warrior Princess.
Woo!
Oh gosh, that girl in leather and this blonde chick that she was with. Hello, intimacy, potential partnership here. Like it was never ever discussed. But first girl crush, whew, Xena Warrior Princess, ladies in leather, yes, please.
Ooh, um, yeah, I think my first girl crush was Kristen McNichol, obviously, because I was so young. But as I got older, Fried Green Tomatoes was an amazing film that depicted softly. I know the intention behind the movie was love between two women, obviously, but they didn't. There was no intimacy aside from hugging, and which is certainly intimacy, but it wasn't something that you would see in today's society depicting lesbian or same-sex couples. But
Oh, the
Mary
first
Stuart,
movie I saw, the first movie I saw that had any kind of gayness or queerness in it was kind of like a big piece of my story, because that was kind of the first place I saw this world that kind of had my people in it.
hmm, do you feel comfortable sharing your story today?
Oh, girl, how much time we got? Like this, I'll give you Cliff's Notes version. um, yeah, so there I was. I think I was 12, maybe 13 years old. And my super right-wing, very conservative, fundamentalist, nationalist in their super Christian faith. Um, Girl, I've had to apologize for things I said as an evangelical teenager, but that might be for another day. But Mummy Dearest thought that we were seriously going to watch a movie at the theaters about Republican presidents.
Mm.
It was called My Fellow Americans. And the storyline was such that the current president got caught doing something, but he was going to, or he was framing not just the previous president, but two previous presidents to say that they did this thing to kind of cover up his thing that he did.
Mm.
Zoom to 2026, but well, I'm not going to digress on that.
Right.
But so the two presidents, it might have been like a State of the Union dinner, but it was something big that was happening, and they were all in their black ties and formal tuxedos, and these two presidents are in the back room while the president is giving his speech, but then it twists and he starts to name them and say that they did this thing and calling them traitors to the country. So then the CIA, the FBI, the Secret Service, everybody is now after them, and so they leave to, for their life, they leave the White House, and it just happens to be the Washington, D.C. Gay Freedom Day Parade, if that's what it was called at the time. And they've got the parades and the big drums. And then here comes these men dressed up like Dorothy. Now, it
Mm.
wasn't until years and years later I learned about Friends of Dorothy, because I was so sheltered. Now, I don't know if I said, but I grew up in Indiana. So that has a totally different piece of like kids in the 80s, or like what the 90s in Indiana was about. Like, if you didn't know, Indiana is the headquarters for the Muslim Brotherhood, the headquarters for the KKK, the headquarters for a couple big demographic groups, and has one of the biggest mosques. And although it is called the melting pot of cultures, it is very white in a lot of ways. I mean, there is some diversity within Indiana, but the areas that I grew up in did not have much, if any, at all.
Mm.
That being said, here are these adorable men in their ruby red slippers, in the pale blue and white checkered gingham Dorothy dresses with wigs that were definitely from the 90s. And they're saying to the presidents, "Oh my gosh, we always knew you were one of us, or we hoped we were." And they're like, "No, no, no. I'm just trying to get out of here." And, Dorothy asks, where are you trying to go? And I can't click my ruby red slippers and take you to home, or whatever that looks like, but I have some friends who might. So they're marching in the parade, and everybody's like waving at them. "Oh, there's the presidents. I knew they were gay." But in connecting them with these friends who might be able to help them get to the next escape, because now everybody's seeing them in this parade, was the best scene ever, Patty. Best scene ever. These two guys in their black tie suits were holding on to the back of these big, beautiful, leathered up dykes on bikes while they were escorting the presidents across the country, wherever they were trying to go to be safe. And I remember like grabbing the seat rails and just being like, my people.
Planning
And I
this?
mean, it makes sense that Xena in her leather and these dykes in leather, it was like, oh my people. Anyways, so fast forward, and now being the president of Dykes on Bikes in Rehoboth Beach, that's a fun story for, I don't think I have that time for that one today, but like, leaving the movie, I remember telling my mom how cool I thought dykes were, and I wanted to be a dyke. And she was horrified, absolutely horrified. Now, we were also at church probably 4 to 5 out of 7 days a week. So, like, we were always like 100% mostly involved in everything we did, every decision we made, the prayers before this and that. And, if you're in trouble, your punishment is Jesus ordained because spare the rod. So, spoil the child. I mean, I could parrot all this stuff, but growing up in that place and space, it was, we can love the sinner, but we're going to hate the sin, and this is a choice, and don't you ever choose that, and this is not okay for you, and we're just going to pray for them. And that place of pitying people that looked so happy and so free, like, I didn't understand it, but I'll speak for myself, not so much for my siblings, but I definitely feared the law of mom more than I feared the law of God. And operating in that place, like I kind of shared last episode, it was like being in a milk carton with holes cut out the sides, but I wasn't allowed to look out the holes. And so I lived this prescribed life. I did what I was told. I went to the Christian college. I had the boyfriend, that I went to Sunday school with since I was in preschool, or whatever, those stories but I was living such a prescribed life, like, it didn't fit me anymore. And it wasn't until you mentioned Martin Luther King Jr. Do you know who Alan Busak is?
I've heard of his name, yeah.
Heard of his name. So Alan Busak is kind of like the Martin Luther King Jr. of South Africa. So when apartheid was going on and Nelson Mandela was incarcerated with Desmond Tutu, Alan Busak was was the third of in their trio of people who got incarcerated together trying to fight for equality and rights and fighting apartheid. And he was a guest professor for 2 years at the seminary I went to.
Wow.
So I kind of zoomed from little, saw these dykes on bikes. Mom said no. Went into a closet I didn't quite know existed, but it was just like, I'm going to turn this off. And I didn't allow it to be a part of me. And it was just a no. Like, I didn't want to be turned into a pillar of salt like Lot's wife for disobeying.
Wow.
So it wasn't like, I didn't look at girlfriends this way. I didn't look at friends in any other way because it was just a straight up no, like hellfire and brimstone kind of no. And I followed these rules that someone else made for my life. And, up to and including, because greater love hath no man than he who would lay down his life for his friends. I joined the military. My brother and I joined together. And part of that journey, I was actually approached and personally asked if I would go to school to be a chaplain for the state of Indiana and the National Guard. And while I was in seminary, and Alan Bosak was one of the professors there, oh my gosh, dynamic speaker. In that place that like James Earl Jones' voice just captivates you and you are like hanging on every word. It wasn't so much that his voice had that depth and that tone, but if you've ever experienced a Black church and that groundedness and like you feel it in your bones, like I felt every word that he was saying.
Wow.
And of all the things that we were talking about that day in that class, that one moment, we were talking about prophetic preaching, talking about Martin Luther King, nonviolence, but also the book that we were reading was called The End of Words, like when there's no more words, when there's nothing else to happen. But it was also piggybacked with preaching in Hitler's shadow. And how, if we are going to be preaching life, preaching truth, preaching anything that doesn't necessarily have to do with evangelical anything, how can we preach and how can we reach if it is met with violence? Because violence doesn't cure violence. Violence can only be met with love. Mm. So I'm sitting in seminary, already wrestling with seminary telling me that God doesn't hate gay people. Like that was foreign to me because I was not allowed to be in that group. It was a sin. It was a choice, but I knew that it wasn't a choice. Like in the deepest parts of my soul, I knew it wasn't a choice, but I was in my military uniform. I had just gotten off duty. I was in my night class and he's talking about this nonviolent presence and how we can really change the world with love. And I'm looking at my military uniform wondering, how do I keep doing this? And I really struggled with that as a piece, but I was also struggling with, okay, there's a God that loves everybody and loves me, even if I were to be gay. And then don't ask, don't tell was repealed in the military. And where I had constantly lived in that place of living up to other expectations, others' rules, it was almost like all the places that I was were giving me permission to be free. Wow. That God gave me permission because I was still speaking that language. So of course that language met me at my soul level there. That God said it was okay. And now the military said it's okay. So now it's okay for me to be okay with me. And I was 27, 28 when I came out. I had been married to a man. We divorced after her kids were born, like it was no longer than 2 years, but that was just not me. And, while this wasn't really a piece of it, once I had that spaciousness to think for myself instead of parroting everything that came to me. It's interesting when you have kids, what that does to you. You know, you open your mouth and your mom comes out and you're like, I never want to do that again.
Yes, yes.
But there was this place that I realized how much I was living up to everybody else's expectations and everybody else's rules for me. Mm-hmm. And I needed to live for myself so that I could teach my kids to do the same.
I love that you shared that. That just gave me goosebumps from head to toe. So thank you so much for saving space for myself as well as viewers, because I feel like our topic today, talking about this in the queer space and you being so vulnerable to share your, not only your coming out story, but your coming to story, if that makes sense. And it kind of brings up a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Sure, sure.
So I feel like a lot of the breakdown is derived in religious perception, or the parroting that you described that you were doing, regurgitating what was fed to you. I wonder if that isn't what most of us felt, that we felt ourselves sort of condemned by society, by our families of origin, which I think for a lot of us leaves the deepest scars, right? Because you want to have a safe space to land in your family of origin, right? As you're being raised. And when you have the courage to articulate who you are, and when it's received with hate or the regurgitation of judgment, which, as you and I know, and I believe most who can feel divinity as well as project
Mm.
it, that that is not at all what the divine wants for us, or the mantra that is energetically felt in the universe. My question to you is, do you think that most LGBTQ plus community members struggle with that feeling of, I'm trying to think of a word, condemnation, maybe?
I can only really speak for me, and I could speak from like different client experiences that I have permission to share, of course. I think, if you're raised in a community of loving kindness, that, you're welcome to be free, you're welcome to have all your emotions, the happies and the sads, the angries and the pissed offs, and the joyful, and like all those other places. When there is an emotional safety just to be all that you are, I don't think that condemnation is an issue. For those who were raised with any kind of religious dogma that didn't include a God that loved everybody, or a God that picked and chose who were the chosen people in any kind of way, sure, that would absolutely breed some harmful internal language for sure. And it wasn't so much that I struggled, in coming out, or I ever thought I was a bad person. It was more of the stream of thought was, well, I'll never go to heaven. So if I'm going to live it, I'm going to live it up.
And that's,
So,
and maybe I didn't verbalize it the way that was in my head.
mm,
That's kind of what I was driving to, the theory of, how can not how can I, um, I'm not empowered enough to be thought of as a normal individual as far as society or religious standards. So I'm not worthy, religious, in a religious perspective and or a moral perspective, per the regurgitation of what you just
yeah.
um, verbalized. So how can I have a healthy relationship with others, friendships, intimate partner
Mm-hmm.
relationships, if what I'm feeling inside is that I'm condemned and or thought of as not equal to, and will not make or will not enter the kingdom of heaven? Because that was regurgitated in my family of origin as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And religious trauma has its own dogmas and rules that, to really feel authentic in living, like, you have to look at those head on. And there's layers. My goodness, there's layers. There's layers of my story that, I tried to give you the Cliff Notes version for time, but there's layers. Patty, there's layers of scars, like you were saying, from family. Like when I came out, my mother told me I was no better than the Taliban and everything ruining America.
mm,
When I divorced, the father of my children, although he disappeared, he's never been around. I've been a solo mama forever. You know, she told me that I was being a bitch and I should have prayed harder. My mother never cussed ever in her whole life, but because I was getting divorced, this would mark her family, her as a mom somehow. And kind of like zooming out from that, I remember it was almost like an out of body experience, seeing the scars and seeing the wounds and almost like watching this nuclear family become nuclear, and
Mm.
then realizing that maybe this isn't as loving and kind as I thought it might be. um, and sure, that it danced with my worthiness to a certain degree. Like I never felt unworthy of love, I never felt unworthy of life, never felt any of those good enoughness kinds of things, but it definitely made me feel alone.
Yes.
Because at the time, like I knew like two or three gay people who were in the military, but I also knew them under the don't ask, don't tell. So like, let's be honest, there's some people who look the part. Stereotypically, some people visibly look that way. I
Yes.
am very femme presenting, very straight presenting. And unless I don't wear makeup and put my hair in some kind of like high ponytail or something, like I don't look stereotypical. And I think that layer has hurt and it has harmed in community building.
Mm.
Um, but layers, Patty, so many layers.
Yes, and girl, I would love to dive in, but I'm trying to be conscious of time. I'm looking at the time right now, and we're going to go into part two of this because it's too good not to.
Yeah.
But thank you to your viewers, to our viewers. If you don't mind staying on, I'm going to do the part two right after this. And without further ado, thank you so much and have a beautiful day.